Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers, of course, the Arizona Cardinals, and my co-host is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site. Also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast, and we're on episode 540 or 541, I think. I can never remember. I guess we'll look that up at some point, but episode something, but you're listening to the show, so we're glad to hear. We thought we might be able to talk about, kind of predict the schedule. The schedule release was expected to be on Thursday, and so I was kind of planning that we could, predict the roster, predict the schedule on this show, and then react to the schedule on Thursday right after it came out. So now it looks like we just have to wait because it's coming out on Wednesday of next week. So we get to predict that. I'll have to make sure to get the schedule, the show up either late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, because the schedule will in fact be released Wednesday night, and then we'll get to react to it. But the Cardinals are in phase 2 of the NFL offseason, their offseason program. Rookie camp is this week, and there's a little bit of stuff going on, Seth, right? We thought there was going to be, maybe it was lean, but we've got a little bit going on. And the fact is we have an actual signing and a visit. So let's start with that. The Cardinals announced the signing of Markus Bailey, basically a core special teams linebacker for the Bengals for the past 3 years. And then Zay Jones, recently released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, a receiver, had over 800 yards in 2021 or 2022. He visited the Cardinals. He's big. He's, kind of adding to the prototype of what we think is what apparently is what the Cardinals want. They don't want little guys in the receiving room pretty much. And so I want to talk about that, especially since Zay Jones is that's the more intriguing one, because I think Markus Bailey makes sense on a lot of levels, right? Because he's not he's played 300 and something career snaps on defense, and 250 something of them came in 2021, his second year in the league. He's been basically a special team, and this isn't like Mack Wilson, who is a special teamer who started to see playing time on defense last year, or Josh Woods, whom they signed last offseason, where he was moving forward, like projecting into a role on defense. Bailey's just basically replacing Zeke Turner, right?
Yeah, it feels like it. And he's a veteran special teams savant. He's an ace special teams guy. And so I like the addition. I know it's not really a needle mover in the sense of intriguing or sexy or anything like that, but I think it's a good move for this team and what they need and kind of how they're going about their business, which is, fun to see, because it's a little bit different than what we saw with the previous regime, and so they just continue to kind of have an idea of what they're doing, especially on special teams, right? It's a very integral, and not that Time and company didn't, but it just seems like it's more of a focus with this group.
Well, and if we look at it from this point of view, Zeke Turner had been in the league since 2018, played 6 seasons with the teams. They just got a little bit younger, basically. And the difference being as well, Turner, a converted safety into linebacker. Bailey is a linebacker. He's been playing linebacker, and so I think he gives them the Cardinals a more reliable option should it come to that. Not that they hopefully would need him to play on defense, because that would mean Kaiser White went down, Chris Barnes, Mac Wilson, and Owen Papo. So yeah, it's just a nice young veteran addition. It's again kind of the trend of they're bringing young players, but you know, I would assume, even though I'm sure the contract terms are pretty low, I would bet that when they come out that there's enough guaranteed money in it that would suggest he's the plan. They would expect him to make the roster.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that's something that we'll see. Like you said, that something comes out, and it's obvious that he's part of their plan, at least in the next season, and so we'll see how that kind of works out through that.
And this is the season now where, as they're in phase 2, OTAs start in a couple of weeks. That's when we'll start seeing our first, roster predictions. Roster projections. So I'll honestly, on Cards Wire, probably next week, I will probably late in the week before they start OTAs, the following one, have a 53-man roster projection. Then after OTAs, I'll do another one, and then after minicamp one, and then right before training camp. And, those are things that fans hate and love, but because they're like, why are you doing? Well,
they love to hate it, so they love it. And then
they get, like, that's the thing. They always hate them, but guess what? Those are the ones that people are reading. They click on all. They click them always.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, that's that. Now the other interesting one is Zay Jones, who is 6'2", 210 pounds, 6'2", 200 pounds, that is. Former second-round pick in 2017, and has been with Buffalo, the Raiders, and then 2 years in Jacksonville. He had his best season. He had his most productive seasons 2 seasons ago in 2022 when he had 82 catches, 823 yards, 5 touchdowns. Was one of their starters there in Jacksonville. Last year, only played in 9 games at the torn PCL, 34 catches, 321 yards, 2 touchdowns. He met with the Titans, but it looks like, the Titans are off the board probably, as they also just signed Tyler Boyd, a guy that took a while to sign. Granted, he got a $4.5 million contract, but he wasn't cut in the offseason. The Jaguars cut him right after the draft. Jones, that is. And it's interesting because,
right away
they got Marv.
Yeah.
But
he's right away the most accomplished receiver in the room.
Yes,
it's not even,
absolutely. Because before Marv, like obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously he becomes the most talented receiver in the room. I think that we can say that without any hesitation, that even though he's a rookie, he's going to come into that room as the most talented and with the highest expectations. And the fact of the matter is we do anticipate that he will be their leading receiver. Between him and Trey McBride, I'm guessing Marv probably, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two has more catches or one of them has more receiving yards. But among the receivers, if it's not Marvin Harrison, it's going to be, wait, why? But yeah, like the rest of the group, the top 3 on the depth chart before they drafted Marv, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Chris Moore, none of those 3 that have even had 600 yards in a season. Zach Pascal, of course, did it twice, but he's had, 19 catches combined in the last 2 seasons or something like that. So his receiving days are kind of over. And if we watched him last year, he was, like, when he was playing late in the year, you're like, why is he playing on offense? And we anticipate that Pascal will probably end up not making the roster. That's kind of our expectations. He's been a cut candidate for a while. But Jones has a 500-yard season. He's got an 800-yard season. He's got a 600-yard season. He's scored 5 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns in the season. He's had over 40 receptions in a season 3 different times, over 50 once, over 80 once. And so he definitely comes in, and if he's healthy, he's definitely the accomplished one outside of the upside of Marv.
Well, and you look at it, there's a couple things first. And the first thing is that this guy isn't even a lock to like make the roster. I mean, we're talking a guy that is been out of the league because was it mental health issues? I don't remember off the top of my head, but he was kind of out of the league for a little bit while he was dealing with some personal things, and then
he's back when he was with the Bills in 2018.
Yeah, I think so. And or 2019, and then they traded him, remember, to Oakland, and everybody was like, why did you trade him to Oakland? Like, that's like the worst. And but like you said, he is, from this standpoint, he's the most accomplished receiver that this roster's had. The issue becomes a couple things. One, he's going to be 20, or he just turned 29, so he's not like a spring chicken anymore. And coming off a PCL is a very tough injury to overcome. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy that's going to have to come in and earn his stripes and potentially earn a chance to even make a roster. And I think people get caught up in like, oh, why are they bringing in these older guys? And it's like, no, they're just bringing in a veteran that can compete. It truly really doesn't even mean anything, because he's a guy that you bring on the roster, see if he is better than
better than the back end guys that you've already got, because
right.
You've got players you haven't heard of. You've got
Daniel Arias.
You've got Dan Chisena. Both of those guys who are going to be, like, if they make the team, it's purely special teams reasons. Chisena, who played special teams, then they released him so that he could go latch on with, I think it was the Ravens display special teams. You've got a dude named Jeff Smith. I don't know anything about Jeff Smith. You got Andre Bocelli, who's been with the Cardinals for a while. But I guess that there's one thing that we can say is that more and more, the more and more receivers that they keep bringing in and also letting go, is that the Cardinals believe in size at receiver. Because if you look at Zay Jones, he's 6'2", athletic, and fast. Back in 2017, he 4.45 40, 36.5-inch vert, 3-cone 6'7", 6'7", 9. That's really good. He had 11-foot 133-inch broad jump, which is wild. And so they like long and athletic. The only guy now that is on the roster, the only receiver that is under 6 feet tall at this point. There's two left. You've got Andre Bocelli, and you've got Greg Dortch. And I'm guessing no one expects Bocelli to make the team. Bocelli is well liked within the organization by the coaches. When he was on the practice squad, he did earn at least once practice squad player of the week, where he got to wear the Pat Tillman jersey the following week. So Bocelli has definitely impressed. But here are the guys on the roster now. So you've got Arias 6'3", Chisena 6'3". We already mentioned Bocelli, who's 5'10", Dortch 5'7", Chris Moore 6'1", Pascal 6'2", Jeff Smith 6'1", Xavier Weaver, the undrafted rookie they signed, 6'1", Michael Wilson 6'2". If they sign Zay Jones, 6'2", Marv Harrison 6'4", T.J. Palmer 6'2". So this is an organization that has shifted away from the small, quick, fast guys to, honestly, it's a more traditional view of our receivers of having length.
Yeah, and it's guys that can win. And I think it's, a succinct understanding of talent. You look at Kyler Murray, and especially when he was working with, and I know people love to hate on AJ Green, but when he was working with AJ Green, like, they had a good connection, and he likes to trust those big receivers to go make plays, right? So why not get guys that fit that can do that for him? Overall, I think this is a situation where you kind of let it play out and you see how it's going to work and where it's going to work and everything before you get overly consumed by, are they moving on from this guy or this guy, and just kind of let the whole scenario and situation play out in and of itself.
Yeah, and if you look at his he's not going to break the bank. He's not going to command much. He's made roughly the league minimum. The most he's made in a season, cash-wise, salary-wise, is $1.5 million. So you're not. He's not looking. Especially he's a cut guy. It's different than Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd, who's an accomplished receiver who is just waiting. This is a guy who was not a free agent, was cut after the draft. He's not going to be, he was hurt and cut after the draft. He's not in high demand. And
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, like you said, he's hurt. Like that's a huge thing that I think people don't get, is that he is hurt. Like he is,
or was hurt, whether I don't know if he's
well, yeah, not so,
recovered.
but he's rehabbing and coming off a PCL tear is an incredibly serious injury. So it's not like you're just like, oh, you can assume or accept that he's just going to come back in and be the guy or be a guy that can give you something, because honestly, that's an injury that a lot of really good players don't come back from, because it saps them of their ability to explode. You mentioned his change of direction and his broad jump numbers. Like that's what Zay Jones gave you, was an explosiveness that now, we'll have to wait and see. And that doesn't mean that he won't have it, but it's not a foregone conclusion or a given that he will.
Coming in next on the Res of Zero podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on and kind of talk about the guys who are on the roster who are in danger, now kind of on the chopping block because of the guys they drafted. That's coming in next on Rise of Zero. We're back on the Rise of Seaward podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. As we move on, we've talked a lot about the guys that the Cardinals drafted over the last two episodes, our last two shows. But now let's talk about the guys on the roster who now appear to be on the roster bubble, I guess we could call it that, because of the guys they have drafted. And so I don't think necessarily we need to look at quarterback, because when they traded for Desmond Ridder, Clayton Tune's spot on the roster became very uncertain. Whether they keep two or three quarterbacks is ultimately what it's going to come down to, and I believe that they're more of the wanting to. They'll probably try and keep him on the practice squad if they need, simply for roster management issues. If you can keep only two quarterbacks on your roster, then it allows you to be able to carry another player who might be hurt, this and that, stuff like that. So let's kind of go down the roster and see if anyone is in danger or is kind of now guys to watch as potential cuts as we go through.
And we're not going to throw in like anybody that's just kind of on here right now.
No. We're talking guys who were roster guys last year, essentially.
I'm gonna say we're not
going to say Andre Bocelli's on the chopping. No, he was already on the chopping block.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know if
Hoskins on defensive line was already a long shot for the roster.
So I mean, obviously, like you said, the quarterback room is what it is. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, they're brought in Talia Tagovailoa to kind of just be a camp arm. We know that
for rookie camp they need that because they don't have a rookie quarterback, and I imagine that we'll have to see, because I know they had some second-year guys come back last year, and so maybe Tune will be there.
I was going to say, what is the rule for that? Can Tune be there?
Yeah, absolutely can be. That's been a thing that's been there before. We've had, I don't know. I don't know the rule for it.
So you've got, so the three is the three. That's the quarterbacks. At running back, I think the addition of Trey Benson puts one guy squarely on the chopping block. We can mention Tony Jones because he was on the roster last year.
Not that we thought that he was going to make the team anyway, but
injury or a miracle. And I'm not trying to be rude. Like that's kind of where his chances are. But I think the guy on the chopping block for me is Amari DiMercato.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
which is he carved out a nice role last year. He played really well that third down role. I'm also not going to rule out Michael Carter.
right. I
Um,
think the only reason I think Carter has a slightly better chance than DiMercato, and not that it's like, we're talking minuscule, is that I think Carter is a better, what you would call a quote unquote third down back.
oh,
Now,
that was the role he was pushed into when he was with the
right,
Jets.
right. And now, to be fair, the Cardinals don't use a third down back. So like it's kind of a useless role in and of itself, because James Conner and now Trey Benson are both guys that they look at as true three down talents.
Yes.
So
But they did use DiMercato, so they did have, like, when it was passing down, they did bring in DiMercato for that particular role, but that was because of his pass blocking. And so, Michael Carter, I believe that, well, DiMercato really did very well last year in that role. I think Michael Carter has played it. I think he played that in New York. And part of the reason why he left is that he got pushed down that way. And so Michael Carter, I don't think, is on the chopping block, but that's a name to watch as a surprise cut if DiMercato shines in the offseason and preseason, and Benson is everything that we think that Benson can be.
yeah. And so I think that's how it starts. So those are the two. I mean, I don't want to say DJ Dallas is a lock, but he feels lock-ish.
Oh,
I mean, obviously,
3-year deal with guaranteed money.
right. Right.
that feels like that he was always going to be on this roster.
From there, you go to tight end. Trey McBride is a lock. Elijah Higgins feels like a lock.
Yeah.
And you would assume, barring him just being struggling mentally with the game, Tip Ryman is a lock.
Yeah.
I mean, unless he just can't line up, right, or like doesn't understand, then he feels like a guy that's a lock. So that leaves Travis Vokalek, who they signed from the practice squad, right, last year?
He
From
signed off, I think it
Ravens?
was Tennessee's or Baltimore's practice squad after Jeff Swaim got hurt. But
Yeah.
so Voklik is the guy that's kind of on the chopping block now because, he was kind of the Jeff Swaim guy in a way, and they just drafted a massive blocker.
Yeah, and a upgrade, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And so Vokalek is on the chopping block. Blake Whiteheart, who they loved last year, but again, an undrafted free agent, is on the chopping block. I mean, he's a guy. I think he got some snaps last year, if I remember right.
Just a few.
Yeah, but he's a guy that, and then how long can they keep this Bernhard Seikovits on the international player?
I think they haven't. I don't know how old it is, but they renewed it. And so originally he would have been like he could have been on the roster, but not with the exemption. But I think they have a yearly exemption, and so we'll see how that goes. I mean, they love him. They love him, but
yeah. But yeah, it just feels like it's one of those situations that's, it's teetering, and at some point it has to be done.
Yeah.
And again, not that he's bad, but they're investing so heavily in this, and the emergence of Elijah last year was fantastic, right?
Yes, that was the fun one, is that guy they claimed off waivers and then had sitting for a while, and then to emerge and I've said it a couple of times, were it not for Trey McBride's breakout season last year, all the hype would be about Elijah Higgins, about he's a breakout player, he's that Ricky Seals Jones, he's that he's Dan the guy that after you got a few good games and a few catches, you're like, ooh, that's the tight end who's going to do it. And we've gone through it over the last decade with about 3 or 4 different guys. And now we've got Trey McBride. Now you can just look at Higgins as a guy. Hey, okay, he'll be a nice second or third tight end. that you can
Yeah.
throw into the mix, because you obviously, like, and the truth is that the Cardinals do have a role for three different tight ends. I believe they were number one in 13 personnel.
Right.
But even then, when they go 12, they kind of swap out some of the. So sometimes they had McBride and Higgins, and sometimes they had McBride and Swaim, and sometimes they had McBride and Higgins at times, just depended on the package. And so they do regularly have a role, not necessarily a large role, but they have a role for three different tight ends in their offense.
So, the tight end room feels, and here's the thing, they might keep 4 tight ends. So it's not impossible with, like you said, how important the position is in the offense, but we know they'll have 3 for certain.
Yeah, and I think last year mostly they had 4 guys on the roster, but mostly had 3 active on game day.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 dress. So that takes us to the wide receivers. I think we're comfortable with the top 3. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. From there, it gets really intriguing, right? Like, I feel like there's not a lock after that. Maybe
Right.
Chris Moore. Maybe Chris Moore.
I think because of they paid him $500,000 in a signing bonus and guaranteed $250,000 of his salary, that he's close to, like, it's not that he's a lock, but when you guarantee $750,000 in cash in year 1, they're expected to make the roster. And we always kind of felt that Zach Pascal was on the chopping block to begin with, but we also thought that he probably would get cut earlier in the offseason. But when they didn't do anything at receiver, that kind of makes sense. Now, and I know that Pascal brings a lot of intangibles to the locker room with his connection with Jonathan Gannon, so I'm not sure, but you have to feel like he, number one, especially with drafting another guy behind him. So you got Chris Moore, which kind of felt like a Pascal replacement. Then you draft Tajon Palmer, and then you guaranteed $255,000 to the undrafted rookie in Xavier Weaver. And you're just kind of looking at it and you're going, who's the guy that's the odd man out? And maybe that was simple as, I think it's as simple as Zach Pascal is probably that guy, probably.
Yeah, and so you have Pascal. You mentioned TJ Palmer. I don't think he's a lock by any means, especially if they bring in a Zay Jones for a year to give Palmer some time, if they can get him through the practice squad. Like you said, Dan Chisena, Daniel Arias, Andre Bocelli, Jeff Smith are all...
Yeah, with the exception of Smith, they all were up and down practice squad of the active roster guys.
So it feels like there's 4 guys that are almost a lock, and then 3 guys that will be question marks unless they add a veteran. And even like we said, if they add like you put Zay Jones in this room and you bump Zach Pascal down, right? So he's wide receiver 4 or 5, but I don't think it, with his coming off an injury, it's not a guarantee that he even makes it. So that'll be what's interesting with this group, because I think they would like this room to be the 3 we discussed: Chris Moore, TJ Palmer, Xavier Weaver, and then if they bring in somebody, Palmer or Weaver, whoever is the less ready float to a practice squad position, and you bring in a veteran, like you said, like with Zay Jones.
Yeah. The offensive line, by drafting Christian Jones, that was the one that I talked about as being, hey, keep an eye on him as a red flag. That don't look like, if he's good, you could say that you put Calvin Beachum on the chopping block. I'm not prepared to put Beachum on that chopping block because of the value that he has as a veteran being able to play both.
I don't think you can either. Like, it doesn't make any sense from a roster building standpoint to put Calvin Beachum on the chopping block right now.
When all that they did this offseason, like they replaced DJ with Jonah Williams, and so your starters, but like your depth, they threw all the depth at center and left guard.
So from there, you look at it, obviously Jonah Williams, the left guard position, Yelda Froholt, Will Hernandez, Paris Johnson Jr. I think you look at Isaiah Adams, Elijah Wilkinson, Evan Brown as all locks to make the roster. And the reason I say that is because they're all left guard, interior lineman, and Brown has played a lot of center. So that gives you three guys. Until I see different, Kelvin Beachum, as we just discussed, is a lock to make this roster. And so then I mean, that gives you nine or eight. Sorry, that gives you eight. And typically you want 10 and you have 8 active on game day. And so then it's, between Tristan Colon, who's been around, Christian Jones, as you mentioned, John Gaines, and then Dennis Daly, Carter O'Donnell, Kith Ishmael, all these guys that have been, around.
Ishmael was on the roster all last year, but I think was active one game. He was a backup center.
Right.
I think Ishmael it's Ishmael and Daly and O'Donnell are the 3 that are the most likely chopping block, because you look at Cologne, they guaranteed $450,000. They got him $250,000 to sign. They guaranteed $200,000 of his salary. So I think, not that that's the defining that's like that changes things, but it will be a factor, because
1,000% it's a factor, Jess. Like at the end of the day, unless there's a huge disparity in talent, if you've already invested the money in somebody, why would you, in the end, eat that cash? And so
Wilkinson fully guaranteed this year.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, I think I think you have 8 locks. I think Cologne is as close to a lock as possible. And then it comes down to Daly, Christian Jones, John Gaines, and maybe you throw another name in there, but nobody's that's jumping off the page that you're like, this guy has to make the roster.
Right. Here might be a maybe, and Yelda might be a surprise on the chopping block.
Yeah, if Evan is the guy at center, right?
Right, because they bring in Evan Brown, who has been a starter for a lot. They guaranteed $1 million of his salary this year, so he got $650,000 to sign. He's going to be here. They guaranteed $450,000 of his $1.4 million salary this year, so you feel like he's a lock. So John Gaines, he's basically a rookie again this year. He spent the year on IR. And so, but quietly, as much as it felt like Yelda kind of built himself into the roster, there's no monetary commitment to him this year. And like, you've got the cap hit at the 550 because he was given $1.1 million to sign last year, but he might be a surprise. Not that I'm saying that he deserves that, but if they brought in Evan Brown intending him to be the upgrade over Froholt, and then you've got John Gaines and then Keith Ishmael as well, you've got 3 guys that can play center plus the flexibility of Cologne. You could go with Froholt and save a little money, because he's a $3.8 million cap hit this year, and you could save 3.2. But that's not a lock. But like the guys that are truly on the drop, like I mentioned, so O'Donnell, Daly, and Ishmael. Sorry about that. And then I think a quiet wonder is Froholt.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair and accurate assessment of the situation.
On the defensive line, where they've remade the position, obviously. So they re-sign L.J. Collier. They draft Darius Robinson. They sign Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, and Kairos Tonga. So they've got guys behind him. I think Roy Lopez now becomes who's been a serviceable player. Roy Lopez, even Dante Stills. I think, is a little bit on the chopping block.
They're not locks anymore, man. Like, it's not a lock that any of these guys make the roster, because it is like this has been a place of investment to improve on last season. And here's the thing is you can love a player as much as you want to. You and I were big Stills fans, um, big Collier fans. We like what Roy Lopez gave, very workmanlike. But at the end of the day, when you're a cog in the wheel of the worst defense in the NFL, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes, right? Like you're being looked at to be replaced, and that's the thing about all of these positions, right? They're all being looked at to be replaced all the time. But especially if you come in and you're just a guy that, you know, there's some less than flattering verbiage, I guess, that you can say, but uh, when you're a guy that is the best player on a terrible defense, it's not a good thing.
No,
So
no. And here's another thing. With Darius Robinson, I was just looking at LJ Collier's contract. As much as they liked him last year, and as much as he was happy to be here, there is nothing about his contract that suggests he's a lock. He's making the league minimum. He only got $25,000 to sign, and so even more than last year. This is very much a prove it deal again for LJ Collier, and I feel Darius Robinson is kind of a rookie version of Collier coming out of college.
right,
In terms of the type of player. That said,
hopefully he's
I feel like he's
correctly.
probably going to be there. But like guys like Phil Hoskins and Ben Stilley and Naquan Jones, none of those guys were already on the chopping block. But guys like Roy Lopez, who's played a lot in the NFL, Dante Stills, I think those two are the main guys you're looking at. Hey, those are chopping block guys because of Darius Robinson.
So that brings us to the outside backers, and I think this is a really interesting one because, as much as we've talked about Zaven, and how much they love him, and I don't think he's a cut candidate because just the room is so thin. And then you have Dennis Gardeck, who I think is, with his special teamsness, is probably a lock, but I'm not going to say sneaky, but it is an interesting one to watch, right? Like, because he's paid quite a bit, and after one, unbelievable year, has never really found that step again.
Well, he did lead the team in sacks last year.
Well, yeah, but that's again.
I'll be honestly, especially with the type of player that Xavier Thomas looks like. Really, I think it draws the attention to Cam Thomas, who disappeared last year, and to a lesser extent, for example, if Thomas improves, like if it proves that he's a decent fit in this system, which it didn't look like he was particularly good last year, Victor Dimukeje is that other guy. But I think it's more likely that Cam Thomas is now put on the chopping block, as opposed to like Tyreek Smith. He was kind of always on the chopping block anyway. But if we're looking at the roster the way it's built, and then I'm looking at that. It's like primarily Cam Thomas, but maybe Victor Dimukeje with Xavier Thomas. Although, like some people were mad at me because of what I put on about Xavier Thomas on Twitter. Like, just don't expect too much. Like, yes, he's got a great first step, but honestly, Victor Dimukeje was a better prospect coming out of college. Like, Thomas never had more than 4.5 sacks. Okay, never.
Well, and the thing is like, it's not that you were being negative. It's just that you're being realistic of
the fact that Victor Dimukeje, who's in his 4th year, is 1 month older than Thomas.
Right.
And he came out of Duke having 16 sacks over the last 2 seasons of his career, and he was just a 6th-round pick. So, like, Xavier Thomas might be a slightly more athletic version of Victor Dimukeje, but it didn't make him a better prospect other than what he was expected to do when he started in college, when he was a top recruit going to Clemson. Victor Dimukeje built himself a nice role last year, but if you're just looking to replace Dimukeje, you're basically getting the same guy because you're not getting younger. You're getting a month younger.
Well, and my buddy Sully always talks about too. One of the things that you do though is on those 6 round picks is you bet on freak athletes or you bet on pedigree, right? And like you said, he does have fantastic pedigree as a 5-star recruit, one of the best recruits in the country. And so maybe that's, and I'm not saying it's going to matter at all, like a lick.
No, I mean, that's why you draft him.
Right. So you draft him with the hope that, hey, maybe that's still in there, right? Like maybe that guy is in there, and it just, with all the things that were happening at Clemson, losing Brett Venables, the kind of tumultuous situation that was happening with Dabo and his refusal to use the portal and things of that nature. Maybe he's a guy that just needed that change of scenery to have a chance to bust out. However, like you said, it's a very, very slim chance that it actually works.
Yeah, like, and the point of like, okay, he's already 24 years old, which means he's physically, he was above everyone in college anyway. Like he reached his full physical potential likely, and wasn't dominant in college, as opposed to like Braden Fisk, who was also older than everyone, but
was the best player on
the field most of the time. And you're generally not going to go from not dominating on the field in college to being very productive in the NFL. There are very few times that happen. Like, I think Dennis Gardeck's one of those cases, but Dennis Gardeck went to this tiny Sioux Falls school, and they drafted him originally to be an off-ball linebacker before they moved to the edge, just because he was just so undersized. So, yeah, but ultimately outside linebacker, I think Cam Thomas, and to a much lesser extent Victor Dimukeje. Will we go to the off-the-ball linebacker? Nobody. Nobody on the chopping block there, in my opinion, because of the draft. Because, hey, they didn't draft an off-the-ball linebacker.
Well, you look at it, there's some names, obviously, and they just brought in Markus Bailey, so he feels like a lot. But, like Tariq Maddox-Williams and Trevor Nowaski are probably not going to make this team. But there's 5 guys, Kaiser, Chris, Mac, Owen, and now Marcus, that are virtually seem like locks to make this roster.
Then we go to cornerback. That's an interesting one because they added 3 cornerbacks, and we feel like 2 are locks for starters. We got, Sean Murphy-Bunting, who they signed 3-year deal. Garrett Williams, who looked good last year. But then after that, because you drafted both Elijah Jones and Max Melton, I would not, I think immediately, even as exciting as Keitrell Clark was a year ago at the start of the season, I think he and Star Thomas and Devad Wilson, all 3 of them, are now officially on notice.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this works out because, like you said, you have Max Melton, you have Sean Murphy-Bunting, you have Garrett Williams that are locks. From there, they love Keitrell Clark. Does that mean anything? Obviously, Elijah Jones feels like a lock, but, we'll see.
Well, and he's built bigger. And honestly, you know what? I thought Star Thomas was a bigger cornerback than he is. I thought for some reason, I thought he was like a 6'2" guy, and he is 5'10". He's built the same as Keitrell Clark. So, and as Devad Wilson, maybe it was just some illusion that Devad Wilson's 6 feet tall. But like Elijah Jones, at minimum, I thought he was the special teams big guy. I thought he was he's going to replace Star Thomas. But I think Keitrell probably has a more likely, but I think very much so. But I think all 3 guys, Keitrell, Star Thomas, and Devad Wilson, and not that Devad Wilson was a lock for the roster, but he did start a few games. But I think all 3 of the guys he put a notice, and I don't care about the other cornerbacks on the roster because they were just guys anyway.
Yeah, and then you got the safeties, and Jalen, Buddha feel like locks. But let me ask you a scenario. Obviously, you're not going to cut either of them. Well, I mean, maybe, who knows? But Could you see if Rabbit, Dadrian Taylor Demerson looks really, really good? Could you see a scenario where they move on from one of their high paid safeties to try and uh, start that? I don't want to say rebuilding process, but or do you think that that's still a year away because you can't trust a fourth round pick?
Well, you can't trust a fourth round pick, especially when your depth is Andre Sachary and a special teamer Joey Blunt. I think it's highly unlikely that they would move on from one or the other.
I mean, here's the thing.
We always thought they were going to do something with Buddha this offseason anyway, but the way the safety markets, but yeah, I don't see. Could it happen? I think maybe a Buddha trade could happen.
So the nice thing is Buddha's dead cap's only $4 million. I mean, it's 3.9, but $4 million. So that's the question that you have to ask, right? And again, I don't think it would ever come down to like, would they cut him? I just don't see that being a plausible action. But, if you trade him, you get, I think it's like 15 million, right, in cap space. Because I don't know. I just, I'm throwing it out there. So I don't think it's going to happen at all.
And it seems more like that Sachary is on the chopping block because Joey Blunt did really well in special teams, and so his role would be special teams, while Rabbit's role on this defense is likely the role that Sachary had as the number 3 safety, the dime safety who comes in while Buddha and Jalen, they're going to start. Rabbit plays that third safety, and then, he is the succession plan for either Buddha or Jalen, who they will probably move on from, one of them after this offseason.
Yeah, so it just doesn't seem like, I don't know if they're, like you said, I think Froholt is really the name that could be a surprise. Like if Cam Thomas played last year, maybe, but he I don't think it'd be a surprise to anybody.
No, like it's disappointing because I'll be honest, like I loved the pick of Cam Thomas. I thought he was going to be really good, like as good as you could expect from like a third round pick. I was really excited about him. He's got the athleticism, he's got the want to, and apparently he was a better fit for the Vance Joseph scheme than the Nick Rallis, at least in year one.
Yeah, so we'll see how that kind of plays itself out. But yeah, I mean, it's just a situation where you've got. I mean, we could talk about the special teams. I mean, Blake Gillikin, Matt Prater, the only guys. So
honestly, maybe Aaron Brewer, because the kid out of NC State, Joe Shimko.
So does Joe Shimko beat him out? I mean, that's the question. So I
think that's the only maybe question, and that's like.
And he's signed through next year too.
Brewer?
Oh no, sorry, he's a free agent after next year.
Yeah,
so
he's on a 1-year deal. He signed a 3-year deal like 4 years ago, and he's been on 1-year deals the last 2 seasons as he kind of hit that age.
So the thing is with him, if you do release him, you do save $1 million. So
you save $1 million, and technically, you're saving $250,000. Because
you have to,
because your long snapper is making $750,000 anyway, so you might save like $200,000.
Well, and so that's the funny thing is like these other positions that we talked about. You typically you have a built-in replacement, like you just said, like with long snapper, punter, kicker. You're not saving any money by cutting them. Or releasing them, unless it's Matt Prater and then you go sign a rookie that's only going to make $800,000, right? Then you're saving money, but for the most part, you're just not. It's not like you're saving any money because you have to pay one of them anyways.
Yeah, And so it would just be a matter of,
It's just
is the young guy
shifting,
ready?
right? And it's just kind of shifting the cost. Like you said, you go from paying 1.1 million to 750,000. So it's like, oh, we saved 350,000. And then if he blows a game, you go, okay, you just lost a game for 350,000. Like that's how that goes. Usually.
Oh, that's the best. All right, coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Special Cardinals talk on the web. The part doesn't make the thing that doesn't make nearly as much sense to me as an old guy, but people love talking about it. Rookie uniform numbers. That's coming next on Rise of Sierra. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Special Cardinals talk on the web. It hasn't been announced yet, but we do know, thanks to a Twitter account, NFL jersey numbers, we do know, and confirmation from the Cardinals' 2 first-round picks, we know what numbers they're going to have. And so let's kind of talk about it, because if there was one thing that was the talk after the draft, 2 things about Marvin Harrison Jr., one being, why doesn't he have a marketing deal in place, a licensing deal in place with the NFLPA, and then 2, what number is he going to wear? Because number 18 belonged to B.J. Ojulari, their second-round pick last year. And, if he took variations, like, well, 88, he can't wear his dad's number. That's retired. He can't wear number 8. That's retired. Can't wear number 11, Larry Fitzgerald. That's going to be retired. Can't wear 1. That's Kyler Murray. Like, could he wear 81? Kyler Murray wore an 81 Anquan Bolden jersey on the draft night, suggesting, oh, well, is that going to be Marvin's number? No, but it turns out that B.J. Ojulari, for whatever, now whether it cost him much or he did it for the good of the team, Marvin Harrison will wear the number 18 that he wore at Ohio State. And so our answer now we have the chance for a momentous player to wear number 18.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, because you and I were talking about it off the air, and from like a pure aesthetic standpoint, 18 never looked right.
18 looked weird as on a guy playing on defense.
Right. So you look at it, you want those numbers in the 50s, right? Or I guess the 40s now are not too bad. Single digits don't look bad for a pass rusher, and then the 90s, right? So it was always odd to me to see that, but guys have their reasons for it.
And there was a legit reason, because number 18 is an honorary number at LSU. And
right.
Ojulari wore the number 18 jersey his final season there with the Tigers, and wished to continue to do the trend. But maybe, and maybe this is an interesting thing, that I don't know if he had plans of wearing it throughout his career because of that, but it's kind of a number that for LSU transports from player to player. Well, I mean, honestly, at least that question's answered. Harrison's going to wear number 18. So, and in case that we needed to have it confirmed, Harrison Jr. himself posted a picture of his new jersey hanging in his locker on his Instagram stories. You can see that story on cardswire.com if you haven't seen it already. For the second year in a row, a drafted defensive lineman is not wearing a number in the 90s. Darius Robinson's wearing 56. Dante Stills last year got 55, and which, very much a linebacker number, very much a pass rush number as well. And so you kind of look at it, and well, last year when Dante Stills got it, it caused me to, sit back and think, wait, are they going to use him on the edge? No, they didn't. So it was just them picking a number. And so Darius Robinson he wore 5 when he was at Missouri, but now he will wear number 56, which will, in terms of an aesthetic, that'll look pretty good, because if they use him everywhere, seeing a number 56 lining up on the edge, standing up, no, nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. I mean, Khalil Mack wears 52, so, similar position. I know Mack is more of a true edge.
Yeah, but LT.
Yeah, LT, right. So, I mean, it just depends on the numbers. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, I mean, with 56, it is a number that we've seen, like Carlos Dansby wore it. Ken Harvey for those old heads back in the day. So, good players that have rushed the passer, and good defensive players have worn it for the Cardinals in the past.
Max Melton, their second round pick, gets to wear number 16, which is the same number they wore at Rutgers. 16 is kind of an odd cornerback number, but nonetheless, it's not a number that receivers typically like to wear. 16 is a weird number, but he gets to continue wearing the number that he had. Go on to the third round, Trey Benson. Their first third round pick gets number 33. That's a real solid running back number. I'll have to pull that one up. I don't remember what number he wore in college.
I think he was, I got it somewhere. Hold on. I think he was a single digit. I think he was like 3.
That would make sense.
Yeah, he was 3. So
he's kind of doing the opposite of what Buda Baker did. Buda, who went down from 30 to 36 to 3. He went from 3 to 33. That way he gets, which was, Larry Fitzgerald, who wore number 1 in college. That's the reason why he picked number 11. What's better than 1? 2 number 1s. Because at the time, receivers couldn't wear number 1 still. So
right.
That's why he wore number 11. What's better than number 1? 2 number 1s. Isaiah Adams, he gets number 74. So sorry, DJ. Sorry, DJ, for your 8 years with the team. Your number gets immediately replaced. Immediately.
Yeah, and it's just one of those situations, right? Like, it happens, unfortunately.
Which is funny because there's some players, those numbers get held back for a while. Adrian Wilson's number has, until this last year, hadn't been used in a game, but it just kind of took a while. So sorry, DJ, you've been replaced already. Adams is number 74, which is just an offensive lineman jersey, whatever.
I was saying that's part of the problem is when you have all these linemen. I mean, it could change as cuts are happening and things like that. So it's not a for sure forever thing, but we'll see. I mean, you can't. Here's the thing: people need to get over. You can't retire every number, so sometimes you just got to make decisions, right?
Yeah. Tip Ryman gets number 87, which is kind of a fun thing in the fact that Daniel Arias had number 87. Special teams guy. He moves down to 38. And I made the joke on Twitter. If you're a wide receiver and you're wearing number 38, you have a tough time. A long road making the roster. Or wearing 38. But Ryman wore 89 in college. That, he wasn't able to get number 89 because that belongs to Whitehart, I think it is. Blake Whitehart. So if Whitehart doesn't make the team, Ryman has 87 right now, but maybe he can get 89 if Whitehart doesn't make the roster. But 87 is a real solid tight end number.
Well, and it's like, you go through things and stuff like this, and like for going back to Max Melton, having number 16. And you just not like, are you going to be like, well, Jake Plummer wore that, and that was really the first quarterback that actually mattered to the Arizona Cardinals. So we can't give that to, like, I get it. It's hard, but at the end of the day, you just got to kind of move on and get over the number situation. And Ryman with the 87, it's the right aesthetic.
Yeah. That's it. Like 87, 88, 89, and 88's retired, so they can't use it. Doesn't that scream blocking tight end?
Yeah. So tight end numbers are, I mean, and 87, obviously Travis Kelce, so that's not a bad number to have.
Yeah, there's that, of course. Elijah Jones, number 28. That's a very defensive back number. I'm not too terribly worried about that. Rabbit, Taylor Dennison, Dadrian Taylor Demerson gets number 42. Which isn't, of course, that's not the Pat Tillman number for the Cardinals, which is number 40. Rather, that's the ASU Pat Tillman number 42. So that's kind of a cool thing, a very safety number. Then you go to round 5. Xavier Thomas gets number 54. He's an actual linebacker. That's a linebacker number. And whatever. And we're now getting to the point where Christian Jones gets number 75. which means 75. That means it's going to be a bad tackle, right?
It needs to be moved to guard.
Of course, the last two notable players to wear number 75 for the Cardinals were Levi Brown and Leonard Davis, both of whom were not favorite by teams. Then we go to round 6. TJ Palmer gets number 83. Whatever. It's a receiver number. That basically, like, if you're in the 80s, it's either for you weren't a lock for the team, or it's a particularly special number to the team, like the Cowboys in number 88. And then you go Jaden Davis, their 7th round pick, we're in number 39. I mean, yeah, sure thing. I'm the guys I'm excited about, I guess, at the beginning of the roster, at the beginning of the draft, late in the draft, I'm like, I'm not convinced that Jaden Davis is going to make the team anyway. So,
right.
And that was Matt Hembro's number last year. So, 39 is a very expendable number, I guess you could say.
Exactly, and so we'll see how that works out for everybody. But these are their initial numbers, outside of maybe Harrison and Melton. These could change. I mean, obviously Trey's not going to get 3, but doesn't mean that can't change. So we'll see how that all goes over the next several months, because I think come probably August, those numbers will jumble up a little bit.
Yeah, a few of them will, at least. And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Secret podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back in a couple of days. We'll figure out something to talk about if something hasn't happened by then. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back in again very soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!